Staying Alive UK. Share your story.
Hello and welcome to the Share Your Story podcast series, a business biography, their story so far. I'm Michael D. Groot and I'm your host. My purpose through this podcast series is to inspire you to take the next step towards your new business venture or indeed develop your existing business even further. I only interview business owners who employ less than 9 employees, and mostly they will be on their own. So let's get straight to it. And today I'm delighted to have on the podcast Bob Roopra. And before you hear from Bob, let me first of all give you the normal introduction. Bob is the founder of Roopra Medtech Consulting. He provides proof of concept and commercialization guidance for medical technologies emerging in the diagnostic healthcare space. His aim is to help new and existing organizations develop sustainable business plans with clear value propositions for their brand and products. But more importantly, Bob calls himself an innovator who ensures a focus on the desired outcome and direction with a fearless approach for doing things differently if needed. His motivations are delivering sustainable, long-term business and client outcomes by challenging them to consider their needs for today and the future when developing their strategies. Welcome to the Share Your Story podcast, Bob. How are you today?
I'm very good, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Oh, brilliant. That's a great little introduction, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it. And that's obviously what you're doing today, but as you probably know, the Share Your Story podcast, we also go back in history a little bit, which is the most fascinating thing, and which is why most people actually tune in. So are you up for that?
I am indeed.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, so to get us started, please could you share a little bit about your own personal life? So, for example, where were you born, a little bit about your education, where you now live, if you moved around, maybe a bit about your family, but that's optional, and then your hobbies and interests, just so people can learn about who you are and where you've come from and a little bit about your personal stuff.
Absolutely. So, to start with, I was born in Leicester. One of the first people, well, I say one of the early people born in the Leicester Royal Infirmary.
Okay.
I then, our whole family moved to the Midlands, to Wolverhampton, and then to Birmingham for a short period of time in Smethwick, back to Wolverhampton, and then back to Birmingham again, where I really got into my middle and my secondary school education really in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And then the interesting thing is after doing A-levels in Sandwell, I ended up back at university in Wolverhampton. So there seems to be a bit of a link going on with the Black Country in Birmingham.
Wow.
Subsequently, finishing my degree, during my degree, I got the chance to go to the US. I went to the University of Kentucky and I did some research into HIV and leukemia drug development. And this was in the very early stages of HIV.
Wow.
We're talking the 90s, so there was huge stigma still and a lot of growing interest around how to deal with it. And you see how far we've come in the journey of that illness. It is literally these days versus it was almost a death sentence at the time. I remember the adverts. And then from there came back to the UK, finished my degrees, went to the notice board and applied for my first role, which would become my first job. And that was with the NHS blood transfusion service. And there I decided I was going to live in Bristol and train. So I moved to Bristol and did my training in Bristol, Oxford, and did a short period of time in Southampton as well. And following that,
hold on. We're not going to rush through it that quickly.
Oh, okay, no problem.
So with your education then, so tell us a little bit about that. What made you decide then to go into the kind of medical direction that you went into?
Great story. I was originally intending on doing dentistry. And
Right.
I thought when I could get into dental school was doing my A-levels, physics, biology, chemistry. And 3 days before my A-levels, my sister slipped down the stairs and kicked the door, which broke my arm. 3 days, this is the Friday night, and the Monday morning, I've got my first A-level exam, and my arm was broken, my writing arm. So I'm sitting in hospital. It's 10 o'clock in the evening. I think we left at about 6:30 in the morning. And I remember sitting there with my arm in my hand for about 4 hours, and all they were saying was, we can give you a few paracetamol. And I thought, you know what? Forget this dentistry malarkey. I'm doing medicine. But as it turned out, I didn't get the grades. And not getting the grades meant I ended up doing a biomedical sciences degree. Because at that moment in time, I sort of decided I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to repeat years. I was just going to make the best of what I had.
Yes.
And that has been the most phenomenally amazing choice that I made. And there's a huge amount of richness that I've gained. I think I would definitely not have gained as a dentist.
So, because you broke your arm, did your sister break your arm?
No, she fell against a door, which we had a staircase and the door opened inwards, and I was standing behind the staircase.
Right.
And as she fell, she kicked the door open.
Yeah.
And my arm was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the door just struck my arm full
Oh
on.
my God. Have you ever forgiven her?
No, she's the youngest, so she'll never be forgiven now.
But actually, it was a gift at the end of the day. She gave you a massive gift, because if it wasn't for her kicking the door open, breaking your arm, you wouldn't have changed direction, right? And you're happy with the direction you went in the end.
I am phenomenally happy. I think there are opportunities that arise in your life where sometimes the decisions sort of get pushed along for you, and the richness you gain from them is just so incredible.
So actually, you have a lot to be grateful to your sister for.
Absolutely.
Right.
And she knows I am.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, sis, if you're listening. Well done. Good job. You made your brother very, very happy. So, not at the time, of course, and this is, I have this saying that I share with lots of people saying, it's a gift. Anything, even when things happen that you don't expect to happen or you don't want to happen, sometimes they're hidden gifts, and you certainly had one in your broken arm. So you changed then to go into, did you say medical sciences?
Biomedical sciences.
Biomedical sciences. So what does that mean?
So biomedical sciences it actually opens up a very vast area at undergrad stage, and it will look at areas from pharmaceutical development to general basic anatomy, clinical sciences. So these are laboratories, clinical and non-clinical. So they will look at the pathology labs. So it's an understanding of our blood, it's an understanding of biochemistry, our molecular buildup, and even down to DNA levels. So all the new testing and new tests that you're hearing about in novel blood tests and pathology and recognition of things such as cancers and illnesses are essentially taught here. And this is the area where the very basic grounding in scientific knowledge in healthcare really comes into its own. And then once you graduate, there are so many options. There's pharma in pharmaceuticals, then there's general biochemistry, there's hematology, immunoassay. So the technologies and all the new things that are changing, all the capabilities of healthcare outside, and they're called allied health professions.
Yeah.
These are people who support everything from physiotherapists and another what you'd call non-doctor and non-nurse driven healthcare.
Right.
It all sort of sits in this biomedical sciences area, and that's the beauty of it. It's so vast that actually if you stood back and you connected the dots, it's quite an incredible place to be, because you're shaping the way that doctors and nurses can deliver their care by really grounding yourself in their thought processes, but then going that step further and developing the diagnostics and the treatments around those conditions.
Okay, so, but what made you decide then? I'm sorry to labour the point.
No,
I just
please.
want to be clear that dentistry was off the board. Your grades weren't good enough anyway. So why were your grades good enough to then progress into biomedical sciences?
It's a simple question of more spaces and less students. Sort of serendipity plays its role there. And again, when you say, or when you talk about gifts,
Yeah.
this was a gifted opportunity. It gave me all the scientific desire I wanted, but in a different format. And then there was also the carrot of finishing this degree and then getting into dentistry, skipping a couple of years, or getting into medicine and skipping a few years. So there was always that sort of carrot hanging in the background. But my key driver was really, it was still in the direction of scientific interests that I had.
Okay. So then, so armed with that, so did you have to do A-levels, or did you then go and do the degree straight away?
So it was my A-levels. I broke my arm during, so I didn't resit them. I just got the grades I got, which I'm very thankful to everybody who put up with me while I was sedated on painkillers in a library.
Yeah.
Talking rubbish, I'm sure, but it seemed to make sense to someone.
Yeah.
But I went straight into university at that level and started with biomedical sciences.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and you did that in America?
No, I did 2.5 years in the UK and then a semester in the US, came back here and finished off.
Got you. Okay. And then you went and found your first job?
Then I went and found, what I call my first job with my degree.
Got you. Okay. Did you do some other things before then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Go on, tell us.
So it starts at a young age. So my family originally always were in the garage business. So cars has been a passion of mine since from a very young age. And I had the opportunity to work on many brands, Porsche, Ferrari, and what have you.
Yeah.
So cars have been important. I was the very first to decide engineering wasn't my forte. I was going to do healthcare. Right. So I'm one of the very few in the family that's chosen healthcare. And so jobs I did, I worked for Topman, selling suits for 2 years on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And I was 15 at the time. I remember them having to get a work permit from the council so I could work, because I was under the golden age of 16 to be working.
Okay.
And I managed to get myself on a Burton training video, because we used to sell suits with other concessionary agencies. Yes. in the same space. And there was a customer who'd originally come to me, and I sort of talked to him a little, and he decided he was going to look around. But while he was looking, he wasn't being attended to by someone else, and I had the opportunity to start talking to him again, then sold him a suit, shirt, trousers, and a pair of shoes.
Wow.
And I remember the manager calling down and saying, that was incredible. But the thing was, I loved it. It was fun, and I wasn't trying to sell. At that time, I was just a 15-year-old having a bit of fun and earning some pocket money, which was fantastic. So that was my first foray into retail. And then while I was doing my degree, I got a job working with Tandy.
Yeah.
If you,
and the electronics.
That's right. Yeah.
They're American, right?
They were Radio Shack, part of Radio Shack.
Yeah.
And then recently the European business was all sold to Carphone Warehouse.
Were they? Okay, I had no idea. Wow.
So the brand is no more, but yeah, it was great fun, because I enjoyed the electronics and all the sort of sciencey stuff around it. So it was good fun. It was a great place if you're a bit of a geek.
Yeah.
But again, it was sales that sort of I found my way into, and selling phones as well for the first time, mobile phones.
Yeah.
In the early days, and it was good fun, and that got me through university and paid the bills. So it was a great experience. You don't realise how much these experiences shape you till many years later when you reflect on them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, so those were kind of the part-time jobs and earning pocket money. And then once you had your degree, what happened next?
So I always laugh at this. I walked out after my last exam, went to the notice board, and applied for a job with the blood transfusion service. Put the application in, went to Bristol, went through the interviews, and successfully became a trainee biomedical scientist. And it's normally a 18-month training. So you have a set of modules through which you go and you get assessed while you're doing the job. And then at the end of it, you sit a Viva exam, which is about 30 minutes to an hour long, dependent on who's assessing you. And I remember getting about 6 months in and talking to my mentor and the guy who was managing me through this process and saying, listen, I can't do this for 18 months. I've got to get it done quicker. I can do this faster. And he said, well, if you feel you can do it, we can see whether we can sit your Viva in 12 months. And so me being me, wanting a challenge, I sort of said, I'll take you on that and go for it. And successfully completed my Viva with a pass first time in 12 months. So it was great for them because they got a productive member of the team who could then sign documentation and do stuff. And you're
talking a little bit of Chinese now when you said Viva.
So Viva is how
do you spell that?
Viva.
Viva. Viva. Wow.
It's like an oral exam.
Right.
So you are questioned about specific areas of the work. For example, here's a cross match. Could you give us the correct blood type? And so they gave me the information, and I was able to cross match the correct blood types for them. And they gave me 3 of these. And then there were questions about health and safety, questions about quality, questions about blood product manufacture, quality about GMP, which was good manufacturing process, which the blood service has to do because they manufacture blood as a product and blood products.
Yes.
So, and it's one of the things I think people rarely understand is that they also go through processes which are designed around safe product creation, manufacture, and to be traced right back to the original donor. Gotcha. Should there be any problem with a donor, they can find all the information and either take the products out of use or follow up and see which patient the product went to if there was if they went through the entire system, so they can trace the whole process. And there was a lot of questions about all of those aspects and also the testing, the virology testing, the serology testing, the grouping, which, it can be quite grilling because you don't have documents in your hand. You just go in, you've been preparing for weeks, and it's like a SWOT exam, and it's great fun.
Wow, fantastic. And so you got that in 12 months?
Yes, indeed.
And you were happy, bunny. So what happened next?
I got a lovely pay rise for being a full biomedical scientist. It was what they used to call a MLSO, Medical Laboratory Scientific Officer.
Wow.
And I was a grade 1, which was bottom of the ladder, but fantastic place to be.
Yeah.
And it was a Saturday afternoon. One of our instruments broke down. It was a fully automated microplate ELISA system. I still remember it because this was a life-changing device.
Okay.
Another serendipity moment. So this device breaks down. It's Saturday afternoon, and we all want to go home because we used to do a sort of a Monday to a midday Saturday.
Yeah.
So we're testing all these blood samples, and so I ring up the tech support line, and he said, "Well, we can get somebody to you by Monday." I said, "Look, I need to do these plates today. Can somebody just talk me through this process? I can do it." I said, I've got loads of engineers in the family. I know how to unscrew things and do stuff. Mm-hmm. Hour and a half later, me and one of the seniors have got this done, put the machine through, worked perfect. The guy on the other side of the phone said, "Well, I'm going to be visiting your site anyway on Tuesday. Do you mind if I bring my manager along?" "Yeah, fine." Didn't think anything of it.
No.
And this guy comes along, and him and his manager, and then they said, "Would you like a coffee?" And when you're at the bottom of the pecking order, a free coffee is the greatest thing that God could send you. So, and these are before the days of the Costa. This is 1999, and so they didn't have their own HR service, and they used an agency, and they said, "Look, would you be interested in being an engineer?" And I said, "Well, what do I get?" "Well, you get a car, you get a phone, you get a laptop, and as far as I was concerned, sold. Didn't even ask the money question.
Oh my God.
So I then had the great fortune to be sent to an agency, Penny Warren Recruitment, and I still remember it. And Jane Adkin and Penny Warren both met me there in Birmingham, and they sort of did this, what they call a screening interview back in the day. And they said, "You're really good. You've got a lot of experience that would be very valuable to another client." I said, "Okay. And do they offer more money?" She said, "Yes, they'll offer considerably more money." I said, "Fantastic. Put me forward." So I end up from this guy who's just, essentially just qualified from the bottle washer, as I used to call it, and now has two great opportunities ahead of me. And I took the interviews. So I went to 3 interviews, and the company I ended up with at the time was Bayer Diagnostics. And I remember getting the offer, signing the contract, sending it off, and the things I'm thinking about is the car, the phone, and the laptop. And the money and all that was wonderful at the time. You don't realize how lucky you are at times. And I remember one of the managers at the BTS saying to me, he said, "Bob, do you mind if I ask you a question?" Yes. "Please go ahead." He goes, "How much money are you going to earn? Are they offering you?" And I told him the figure. He said, "Do you know that's only £250 less than me?" And he'd been there like 15 years.
Wow.
And you're like, okay, great. So lo and behold, that was I joined Bayer Diagnostics 1st of March 1999.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Incredible. Oh, honestly, my God. And how long
honestly, go on.
And was that then doing what specifically?
So I joined as what they called a system specialist in hematology, and as luck would have it, and I have to profess to be I feel very blessed because there's always good luck ahead. Always. It just presents itself, and I am really thankful for that, and very humbled by the fact that I always have that. It was Bayer had just launched a new hematology system called an Advia 120, and with all new launches, it was so successful. With success, it created its own problems, because some of what you would normally call teething problems didn't get picked up slowly, because, we're not talking 10 machines going out and testing. We're talking thousands of these things went out, and they all discovered they had this challenging problem. So to put it in a very short context, in my first 18 months, I did 96,000 miles in my car.
Whoa.
And not only that, I had the best car in the world. I had a Ford Puma, which was laughed at by all of the engineers because they called me, they used to say I'd turned up in my hairdresser's car at the time. But me and that car really got to love each other. It was a fantastic car. It was very reliable, and it was really a lot of fun to drive. So I was up and down the country, got into loads of laboratories, and really I got my first indication of how valuable a good engineer with some sales experience, and how that can really change the way you approach even customers.
Yes.
And how you think about not what you tell them, but how you frame what you tell them so they understand. And you're setting a real expectation. But with the nice thing about engineers is they all live to do the best they can for their customers. And I think that's one of the greatest things about framing things as an engineer. And so from there, I did that for 18 months, got to know the instrument very, very well. And from there, I basically got asked, there's going to be a new position, it's going to be advertised. Would you like to apply for it as well? And that was an implementation specialist. They didn't have one for hematology. So this was going to be the first person. So essentially, we were so successful with this instrument, we were implementing them over weekends.
Wow.
And the challenge with that is that when you install an instrument over a Saturday and a Sunday, by Tuesday, the customer's broken it because they don't quite know how to use it.
Yes.
And so I had the opportunity to write what we would call a standard model for implementation. And this was, if you had one instrument, it was 1 week. If it was 2 weeks. And the first week was unpackaging, installing, testing, validating the instrument actually does what it says. And we're confident that it can be let loose to the customer. Second week was really making sure everybody who's going to come into that contact with the instrument and use it will be able to comfortably understand what everything means. And that's not just from interpreting a result, but when an error message comes up, when a warning message comes up, what do you do? How do you deal with it? And how do you keep calm and focus? And that was probably the best a bit of insight that I'd had as an engineer that I was able to bring to the new role. So I was successful in the implementation role. And that then was adopted across the whole of Europe as a standard practice.
Wow.
So again, did me absolutely great favors in terms of being able to, give something back to the company, and I loved the company. I had a lot of fun there.
Yeah.
I think everywhere I've worked, I've had a huge amount of fun. So from there, I moved to product management. So I did that for another 18 months. And I learned about other instruments as well, not just blood hematology. I learned about immunoassay, which tests all the hormones and usually hormones and chemicals in our body, so in our blood.
Yes.
So I had a lot of fun as I learned about other instruments and implementing them, and I got to travel all over the place and had great training courses which were run. And then from there, I got asked if I was interested in marketing. Somebody picked up on the fact that I remember one of the sales guys, really good friend of mine now at the binding site, and he said to me, you know what, you've got this you'd be great as a sales guy. And it's going to sound really strange, I'm going to say this, but I didn't feel comfortable selling.
No.
The reason was this idea of having a number over your head, this theory that the number takes over your life and you've got to do this, and I don't know how I'm going to sell to someone.
Yeah.
And Les Farrington was his name. Les turned around and said, Bob, don't try and do that. Just be yourself. And he said, why don't you look at marketing? We're looking for a product specialist, and if you're interested, apply for the role. Again, I can't say you're going to get it, but have a go. And I was very successful. I got the job. And I still remember my presentation. I had the sales and marketing director, HR, another person, and I almost started up like one of those circus routines. Everybody was doing these really detailed. It was about IT, data management, which is the world's most boring thing to discuss. But it was interesting because we had to do these presentations. I was looking at the presentations everybody was doing, and they were all really serious, scientific serious. And I sort of went in there like a sort of you could have worn a cane and just sort of marched into the room doing the way. I sort of, you asked for this, you asked for that, and we gave you this, we give you that, and this is how you do it. And it was actually quite tongue-in-cheek to the point where I almost got in trouble for being almost coming across as flippant.
Yes.
But the idea was, and I remember the closing scene, it was, Bob, you're coming across a bit flippant. I said, yeah, but you're never going to forget me.
That's right.
So, as words would have it, I was successful, and I was up against some fantastically good candidates. So I was really quite humbled by that, and I did that for another 18 months. I went and I got into automation systems. So, these are big tracks that you put in laboratories, and they take the blood round to different instruments. And I got into the data management, and I always have a funny story, which data management and IT, and I always say, well, I was the only Indian in the room, so I got the job. Not strictly true. I got it by my merits, but I think that's always good fun to share that one. And I did that for 18 months. I learned a huge amount about marketing and how important it is to get clear messaging in a format that is not necessarily what's always done and how it's done, but you've really got to stop regularly and say, what am I trying to say? Yeah. And I think that's a lot of times, a lot of companies become so introverted that they forget that it's not my journey, it's the customer's journey, and how am I relating my value to their value? And so I did that, and then lo and behold, sales finally came along, and it was it was another incredibly influential character.
Yes,
Charlie Ironside. And Charlie sort of stood in my little office space one day, my little pen, and he came along, and I'd just got married, came back from my honeymoon, and there's this thin, grey-haired guy standing in my space. I said, "Are you Bob Roopra?" It's a Scotsman.
Yes.
My terrible accent, but I am. I'm Charlie. Nice to meet you. You're going to be working for me. That was pretty much it. And Charlie was one of these guys who was really direct, really brilliant. And Charlie was influential to me for one particular reason. The one thing Charlie said to me, which I'll never forget, and he was like it's great. The relationship I had with him was almost like a second dad, I used to call him, in a laughing way. Even my wife used to say it.
Yes.
Was Charlie was always looked beyond the role, and he looked at the person, and he really didn't mind developing great people to do great things. And he didn't limit your role as your ability. And he really started to harness more of my knowledge around the informatics and the automation, and started teaching me on how to extract value. Then he said to me, "You really need to get yourself a good business education." He says, "You've got a good head there." And he goes, "A solid education would help." And he was the real driver behind me getting my MBA, and why I decided to invest in myself at that time. And so you got to remember, I'm not long married, and I suddenly embark on a 3-year MBA with the Open University, and which was a longer course. And to be honest, I sort of doubled up in the final year to finish. And my daughter was born shortly after I finished. So, but Charlie influenced me and really built me and gave me good knowledge on sales. What was account management? What was sales? What was prospecting? And he created this fantastic product called the Prospect Bank, and it was essentially looking forward to the future. And he'd done this in a couple of organizations, looking at where tenders would come through and then where they would be coming up again. So you were actively working on those accounts at the right times.
Yes.
So it's all about perfect planning. So again, great influence, fantastic guy. And then I went back into sort of what we call sales support for a year and a bit, where I helped with guys with really informatics. As it turned out, as the only Indian in the room, I was really good at articulating the IT message.
Yes.
And I really made that my own and developed a lot of tools and stuff. At this time, it's now coming up to 2007. We're in the tail end of 2006, and Bayer Diagnostics sent a memo saying that Siemens was acquiring the diagnostics division of Bayer.
Wow.
So at that point, on January 1st, 2007, I switched from being a Bayer Diagnostics employee to a Siemens Healthcare Diagnostics employee.
Right.
And Siemens was fantastic. Again, I was in the IT element. I was in my own, and I was given a role which started as an IT product manager role, and it evolved into something called a system specialist. What they found was, because I was working in the project management group, I was using Microsoft Project and planning and costing and timing, in everything, including third-party time. Was IT was always slowing down every delivery of complex systems we were selling.
Yes.
So I was given a role to say, okay, you're going to be involved right from the beginning of the sale. You're going to be the architect of the system. You're going to write down the cost. You're going to develop the whole delivery schedule. You're going to oversee with the project management team. And then right at the end, your job ends when it's signed off and handed over to the technical services group. So I owned this whole almost supply chain of IT. And one of my greatest achievements in that was N3 is what they call the NHS spine, or the NHS's own IT infrastructure.
Right.
And in order to remotely manage your instruments or check, you have to have access to N3. Bayer had never achieved it, and our division in Siemens hadn't. So a lot of people had tried, and it was another one of these projects, and that serendipity is brilliant. Threw me another lifeline. And this one was, nobody wanted to do this project. 3 people had tried. They'd found some outside consultancy who were going to do it all for us and then charge us almost $600,000 a year or something like that. It was an extortionate amount of money. And I got here you go. You got 6 months, make this work. So me thinking, okay, I got to do this in 6 months. Let's see, how do I do this? Started looking at the company, and then suddenly I leaned back in my chair, and so we're diagnostics. We were on the ground floor, and Siemens Healthcare has everything from X-rays to MRI. And as I'm leaning back, I suddenly look upstairs, and I see this MRI business, and I'm thinking, hold on, they have an N3 connection. I'm sure they do. So lo and behold, bold Bob Roopra fashion, decided to get up off my chair, walk upstairs to the general manager, or should I say, he was literally the CEO of all of Siemens Healthcare, walked into his office, knocked on his door. Really nice guy, Gunter Dumbrow. Knocked on his door. Gunter, who do I talk to? Who manages your N3 connection? And the next thing I know is, yeah, come with me. I'll tell you. And he introduces me to the guy, who suddenly gives me a document, which is the best way to describe it is: have you ever seen the tax laws? The tomes you get. It's about as big as that. And he goes, well, you have to complete that. And I said, okay, so this is what I'm trying to do. And we had this discussion which lasted about 20 minutes. And after which he said, that's going to be complex. That's going to be tough. But I can tell you all the people you need to deal with. And I said, okay. So this email gets sent out. And I communicate now so that I'm in diagnostics. I'm now working with Siemens Healthcare. And Siemens Healthcare has put me in touch with Siemens Information Services. Siemens Information Services have put me with Siemens Remote Services and Siemens Legal, because we have this thing about safe harbor where data goes around Europe and all the principles and legalities of this.
Yes.
So I'm talking to all these guys. I say, okay, what do I need from a legal standpoint? Well, you need this document. Have we got it? We're already signed up. Where do I sign? Well, you have to sign this document. Of course, this document has to come from either a CEO or a GM. So I'm thinking, how do I do this? So I go back on banging on Gunter's door. Gunter says, okay, I can sign that for you. So he signs this. Brilliant. We got the legal bit done. And now what I need to do is now get the diagnostics guys in the US to design a sort of communications pathway.
Yes.
So they do this communication pathway. Absolutely phenomenal guys. The guys in Germany or somewhere are designing these special switches so that our stuff can go into N3 and it's all absolutely secure. It can't go through any other network. It has to make sure that it's completely isolated and not accessible.
Sure.
It's all really well controlled. So they had this whole control, and there's no data actually going anywhere. It was viewing. And I remember we're 3 months in, got these 4 companies, and I made some fantastic friends during this time. And then we're sitting in Leicester Royal Infirmary in front of an instrument. And this is the day where it all goes live. Well, we're going to give it a test and see if it's worked. And I'm standing next to Duncan Walker, who was a really good friend of mine. He passed away sadly from a brain tumor, but he was a fantastic engineer and one of the few guys. He always used to say, I'm sure he had mild Asperger's. A really nice guy, but when he could work on something, he could talk to you in another language. Mm. And essentially, you had to say, Duncan, okay, you know what? For a minute, remember, I'm an Indian heritage. You got to speak English really slowly. we used to have great laugh. But we're sitting in Leicester Royal Infirmary, so Leicester's special to me because I was born there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we've got Andy Dorrington, who's like lab lead of this automation system. And we log on, and there's this pause for about 5 seconds, and nothing happens. So we call the guy in Germany. He goes, oh, sorry, switch was off. Puts a switch on. And by the way, we've also got the hospital IT trying to open these ports for us and do stuff. And all of a sudden, he logs into this instrument, and there's this whole euphoria of, oh my God, it actually worked.
Brilliant. So
we got this to work. We've done it in 3 months, and we saved the company £650,000.
Wow.
And the whole team, that's everybody on the team, got nominated and was given a Siemens Silver Award. And it was one of those moments where I think for me, I'd done something fundamentally amazing for a company, and something really, really big. I mean, these are different companies within companies, and and it was a big deal because this had been going on for about 2.5 years before I was sort of given the project. Mm. and then to turn it around so quickly and so low cost was absolutely phenomenal. It literally cost us nothing. I think it was about $400
Oh my God.
at our time. So it was really, really good. So yeah, that was great. And then I'd been told I'd done really, really well. So it's getting through to now 2010. So that project had passed on, and then it was just more of the same, enjoying doing different things, learning presentation skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a lot of work with Siemens and the NHS as well, talking about IT. And then a good friend of mine, a recruitment consultant, called me up and said, "Bob, do you fancy something different?" And if you're getting to follow the flavour of my life, it's not exactly been with a plan. It's just sort of something new comes along and I'll have a go.
Yeah.
And I went for the first interview, was with Abbott, point of care. Second and my third interview, final interview. And by this time I did a presentation. It's really interesting. I'd done some training on presentations, not just technique, but how to build PowerPoints and using a lot of pictures and imagery versus words.
Yes.
And I basically managed to, in my mind, copy what an Abbott slide would look like. So it looked like their own template.
Yes.
And when I presented afterwards, the HR guy asked me the question. He said, "Can I ask you where you got the template from?" I said, "No, I made it." And he's like, "I'm going to show you something." He pulled up the Abbott template. Even the colors were literally exactly the same. And he said, "How did you do it?" I said, "I used your website." Sort of worked out from there what things look like. And I got that job, very successful, international product manager. And it was in point of care, which I thought at the time was going to be is becoming more and more the norm. So the difference between point of care versus general laboratories is blood sample is taken, it's sent to a lab, and a day later or a couple of hours later you get your result.
Yeah.
Point of care means you can essentially do the same test next to the patient within a set time of 10 and 15 minutes.
Amazing.
Some of them as quickly as 2 minutes, 90 seconds some. And so it's an incredible quantum leap in how far we're now progressing with tech.
Yeah.
And so that did two things. During this transition it gave me international experience. So the areas I covered from a marketing perspective were everywhere except for Canada, China, and the US. So it's rest of the world, really.
Yes.
And I got to really put my stamp on it. We're changing the direction of the business. So I got to learn a lot about how you lead transformation, how you take people on the journey, how you work out who's going to go, who's not, how you deal with different. It was dealing with complexities and change. It was great fun.
Wow.
And I'd done that for 2 years. And again, opportunity came a knocking. As it turned out, I was a hematologist by background somewhere in my history, a long way ago. And a job came up and I applied for it in Princeton for a new point-of-care hematology product. I did that for 10 months. I was traveling to and from Princeton regularly. And it really got me, and that was whole world, including US, Canada, and China. So for now, I was starting to deal with all the complexity of all the world's regulation authorities, planning the strategy, how we were going to take the product forward, who were going to be our primary customers, the whole commercial journey, pricing, and all the 4 Ps and 5 Ps and 7 Ps, as people call them.
Yes.
But sometimes the thing that goes missing is we go through all these mechanical systems, but we forget the very human element of getting stuff done.
Yeah.
And also that if anyone's going to throw a spanner in a standard process, it's going to be a person.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree.
So I learned all the beauties of ambiguity and manufacturing in one country and shipping via another and all this great stuff. But that really got me more and more set up. And then an opportunity arose 10 months later. They decided they weren't going to take this product forward. Even after I was in the training video, which was kind of sad for me because I got my first cameo in TV. Unfortunately, it's on a disc somewhere in an agency. But from there, the opportunity came up to be a general manager, run the Abbott iStat business in the UK and Ireland. And I ran that for 2 years. We had 2 very good years, did very well. And then having done that for 2 years and being a general manager, it taught me a lot about me and how I'd come along on this journey. And one of the things I started finding that I really enjoyed was doing what Charlie had done with me in some respects of putting people on their journeys.
Yeah.
But also that if you can get the vision and the values of the people aligned with the sort of with the promised land, it's a sad statement to use, but of where the business is going, then, you know, you don't walk, you get pushed up that hill.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible thing to experience, to see everybody's energies in one place at one time. And, you know, I got to work with some fantastic people like Peter Farrell, great VP at Abbott Point of Care, and Glenn McKenzie, another guy, really good influence, really taught me a lot about business development and things, and really, really good people. But Steve Parker, and I mentioned Steve Parker particularly because when it came to the next transition of starting Roopra Medtech Consulting, he was really sort of the guy who said, you don't realize how valuable you are and how much knowledge you bring. He said most consultants have either worked in consultancy or they've worked in senior positions. You've done the whole lot from the ground up. And he said, you have this ability to be able to connect all the dots in all the different fields.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, you've done that. So you really do bring it forward. And so when I decided that, so I'll always mention my kids because they are brilliant. I've got a 10-year-old daughter, a really smart kid, and a 1-year-old son. And my son was about 6 months old and I'd not spent much time with him. So I decided the relationship with Abbott, maybe it was time to do something different.
Yes.
And I was getting to that point of, you know, when I'm inkling to do something. You know, the nose is tingling again. It was 2 years and I need to do something different. And I spoke to Steve and we made the decision, and both Abbott and I, you know, amicably agreed that we would do different things.
Yeah.
And the next stage is what I could say the most frightening, but the most phenomenally enjoyable part of the journey. And I understand why many people just don't want to be their own boss. It can be very frightening waking up in the morning and say, what do I do? And this is where, again, people like Steve Parker was incredibly valuable. And then through him and his guidance a little, I got to know and meet a whole lot of fantastic people. There's some great people I meet in Birmingham University and in Warwick. You know, I've worked with some great people now, some good clients. And even with like Medilink in the West Midlands, which I do happily mention these people because they've helped me on the journey. And I think a lot of the time when people make a transition from commercial, they do it much later in life. And this is what I find when I'm at these meetings and there's all these consultants in their sort of mid-50s and then there's me in my early 40s.
Yes.
And you get this sort of, wow, it must be interesting for you. We just do this to top up the pension. You're doing this for a living. And then I've got people like Michael Brannigan Harris, who's a phenomenal guy in market access. And he's been really, really valuable as a resource as well.
Fabulous.
And so all I can say is that there's so many people in this field that sort of like pay it forward.
And how long... Incredible story, Bob, and thank you so much for sharing, you know, all the details so openly and so transparently. I really, really appreciate it. But what was the main motivator? Was it your young child or wanting to spend more time at home that you decided to create your own business?
I think what that was not the motivator. That was a switch. I think the motivator had always been there from a young age.
Yes.
And I've always it's going to sound strange, but I've always visualized myself running my own business.
Right.
And consultancy was the point of starting that.
Yeah.
It was the doing things. Because one of the things I like doing as an individual is owning the problem.
Yeah.
Because I think when you own the problem, you don't just say how it can be fixed. You actually go out there and you do it. And there's a real sense of value from the person you're solving the problem for. And there's also a huge amount of extracted value from what you've done for them. Because a lot of the time, you know, I had consultants who used to come into different parts of the businesses I work with, and they'd tell you, this is what you need to do. And then the transition journey, if you were lucky, you sort of sat down just as long as they did and planned it out. But often what was happening, you were in a fire drill situation and it was like, come on, everybody, we've got to do it. We've got to do it now. And all chaos would, somehow from chaos, if you were lucky, you found a bit of order. If not, it just went to rats. And my motivator for me starting business was always my thing of wanting to be able to own my own business, control my own destiny. And I thought, I'm making so much money for these other guys, I'm sure I can make it for me.
Yeah, good point.
And I wanted to leave legacy. As my kids are growing up and they're going to go through university and the rest of it, I want them to have something they can take part in and build.
Yeah.
Beyond where I may take it.
Yeah.
Rather than this, there's going to be a cachet of the way life is changing, in whether there'll be enough, housing, to everything, to whether there'll be enough jobs.
And how long are you running your own business now?
I am indeed, yes.
How long have you been doing it?
So I sort of started around June, about this time last year, starting to prospect and build some ideas up, but I actually registered the company in October.
Okay, so you're fresh young business, right?
I am indeed. And the nice thing is I'm keeping the lights on, paying the bills, and even managing to go on holiday.
Wow, that's amazing in your first year to be doing that.
It's a blessing. And again, some very good people.
Brilliant. And so one of the questions I ask people running their own business, what have been some of the challenges for you in doing this?
The biggest challenge you find in consultancy, in my area in particular, in medical diagnostics, a lot of the new tests and technologies coming forward are usually developed by the companies, the large players themselves, Roche, the Siemens, the Abbotts, and the Beckman Coulters and what have you. And so there's very small amount of startups that do specifically diagnostics. And that's why I've been lucky in that I've actually got a couple of clients who are med tech. So they're like readers and imaging equipment and other areas, which luckily, because I worked throughout the hospitals as well, I was able to connect with. And I think the hard part is always finding that first and second customer. I think the first customer is great, but it's the second one that really starts to define you can get business and starts to get the noise out there that you're someone who can do something.
Yeah.
But also where you go for that business. It's not like it's not like a shop where you're selling something that somebody wants. You have to find somebody who needs your product. And I think the lucky thing for me is when I meet people, and I'm a great I do articulation verbally very well, I think. That helps me sort of connect with them on a very personal level and understand what they want, and then answer that specific need. And that's where it grows.
Brilliant. And then the contrary to that then, so that's some of the challenges, finding your first and your second, very good points. And then what about some of the highlights, in your young first year in business? What have you enjoyed?
I have enjoyed working with clients who have phenomenal technology coming to the forefront. I mean, and it's really difficult to say. I'm trying to word this because I'm in an NDA, so I don't want to say what to do.
Absolutely, no, you mustn't.
So the best way to describe it is there are companies who are going to change the way healthcare for different conditions is provided.
Yeah.
And when you see what's really coming out of the universities, you start to realize how valuable you are to their journey, because a lot of these guys are designing phenomenal stuff, and they sometimes don't realize the application. So, for example, something which can be very engineering based can actually have a very strong application in healthcare.
Yeah.
And something designed in healthcare actually may not have a big market in healthcare, may have a massive Formula One type materials or imaging type application, which is far more valuable. And it's seeing all of these different things coming through, which they've been probably the greatest highlight has been seeing those and getting involved with some of those. And what I really look forward to is somebody turning around and saying, hey, we need someone to help us take this all the way through to commercial.
Yeah.
Do you want to do it? And sort of get involved and really deliver something myself. I think that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, so you alluded a little bit about a vision that you have with your kids taking over your business in whatever form it might be. But as you're quite young in your business, have you developed, a bit of a vision for the next 3 to 5 years, how you see this progressing? What's the dream for you before the kids take it over? Because they're far too young yet.
That's the plan, to give me some time to and made it. So the way I designed my plan, and when I went into business, I thought, you've got to have a plan. My dad used to have a plaque in his office in his business, which was, do you plan to fail or fail to plan? And I always remembered that, because it is so true. I've seen people who just make stuff up as they go along. And in some ways, that could be the sort of story of my life. But there was always a plan there. And the plan was to progress and to grow. So from my business perspective, the idea was to do the consultancy first and to have 3 specific tiers. Startups, which are really companies who are in fledgling stage. I need to understand, is there a market? Where is that market? How do I access that market? And is it worth accessing that market? And they're the sort of very basic type questions. And then there's this second tier of businesses, which are transformation. These are small SMEs who are growing. And what I often have observed is when businesses grow, they do it inwardly. They think, if I got 10 more sales guys, I could get £1 million more deals, and then I could do this and then that. And what they don't realize is, what is it the customers come back to from them? Why do customers buy them and not somebody else?
Yeah.
And that tells you a lot of stories about what makes businesses successful. And I think we spend so much time thinking of what breaks rather than what works, that if we spend a bit more time working at what works, that's where you'd want to invest and how you'd want to invest. But also, what works tells you what's going to work in the future and gives you that vision of change. So with that in mind, I knew consultancy was my starter to get some money in. And as I said, keep the lights on, pay the bills, and take us on holiday a few times. But the long term was then to start investing in some of these businesses as well, and find a route to either bring investors in, and then to find yourself supporting these companies for longer term.
Yeah.
And to drive them. And the idea is that if there's a good business there, that actually I make it one of my own. Yeah. And to create a diagnostic company of my own. As I said, I've done it for other people. There's no reason I couldn't do it for myself. And then the vision is very, very clearly, that over a much longer period of time, that is, but to become a medical company and then to work in different fields of medicine. I think there are a lot of medical companies that still, when you look at the structure of the company, don't work with each other. And they'll all band about innovation, which is really adaptation. They're adapting what they have. And I'm working with companies now who really are going to be innovating. They're going to be doing it differently.
Yes.
It's not the approach that's been taken. This is new technology, so a new approach. And for me, that's really, really exciting. So the plan is, as I said, there's 3 core areas, consulting and startup, mid-sized businesses, and helping them transform into big, successful companies. And that's where that passion about being long-term.
Yeah.
I think too many businesses are thinking just before their eyes, and some of them are in the situation where they have to. But I think for that, they need a short, mid, and long-term plan. And what they're doing is they're not spending the time doing the mid and the long term. So they don't move from where they are.
Wow.
And so that for me, that's the biggest insight I've got, or even from large companies, multinationals who do some things which are so short term, they actually destroy their long term vision because they interfere with the two.
Yeah.
And I think keeping those in line is important. And for me, the investment and then also the ownership and growth of my business into hopefully a multinational would be great.
Brilliant. Well, fantastic. It sounds, listening to your story and how everything has come up on the journey unexpectedly, and you've gone for it and it's taken you to the next step. I have no doubt that all of these things are going to happen for you. So amazing stuff, man. Sounds really, really interesting. So I've got a couple of questions left. And it's been really, really interesting and fascinating. But even in your young 1 year in business, if you had one bit of advice that you would give aspiring business owners, or indeed even people that are already in business, as a consultant, so put your consultant hat on, what advice would that be?
Take time to plan. and don't be afraid to share your plans with good people. And don't be afraid to ask somebody who doesn't know anything about your business, because 90% of the time they will give you your greatest insights because they're not conditioned by everybody in your field.
Yeah. I love
and
it.
that has really worked for me, because my dad was a business advisor he had many businesses. We had garages, and we had a clothing factory, and driving school. He'd done loads of things. Eventually became a business advisor, helped a lot of people start up their businesses.
Yeah.
So in some ways it was kind of ironic, because when I was young, he told me, he said, you're going to be an engineer or you're going to be in business, from a very young age. And I laughed at him, saying, no, I'm going into the medical stuff. No, it ain't going to happen. And I'm sitting here today.
You're doing what your old man did.
Doing what the old man did very well. And the thing is, being able to take advice from somebody, and the nice thing is that's the point I'm making, is because because although he knows me, he also sees me for the strengths I have, versus just a clinical guy, versus just a corporate guy. And somebody shared something with me. He was from startup. He very successfully developed a startup to a big business that he'd sold on, and now was retired. And we got in a conversation, and he's a consultant too. And he said, I'm going to find it really interesting watching you, because you come from a very corporate perspective, and I come from a very much a sort of a playground, build your business, sort of find everything. And we had a really interesting conversation, because one of the projects I've got at the moment is a company that's in late stage startup now, and is starting to really gear up to product launch and everything else. And the big thing that came up, and the guy said to me, was, what you're bringing to the party already is this whole image of being corporate. And you don't realize, again, and that's another thing that you don't realize you do, you make a company organized in a structure and a format where there's still space to play, but all the mechanisms of control that are required from a governance and a corporate ownership. So, for example, branding, how you present yourself, is it consistent? Does it match up? And are people doing strange presentations with all sorts of different slides? But starting to standardize that approach, standardizing how you maintain your records, how you maintain historic documents and stuff. It's incredible how much it changes, and how you bring a different mindset to how sort of playground. And I always call it playground, because I think startups are fantastic. You can do literally anything, and they are very creative, and structure. A little bit of structure around creation done well won't stunt that creativity. It'll actually enhance it and give it a good platform off which to play.
Yeah. Wow, brilliant. That's great stuff. And we could talk for a long time about all of this. It's really super interesting, but I'm going to have to end it. and the last question is, how can people get in touch with you, Bob? Where can they find you on the web?
So I'm developing a website at the moment, so it's not there. Best two ways to get in touch with me is on my LinkedIn. Name's Bob Roopra. Or alternatively through your website.
Yes, and good point, because on my website, on the podcast blog, with your audio, there will be a form that people can fill in, and then you'll get the email. So if you want to continue the conversation, go to stayingaliveuk.com/podcast, and it's episode 17. There you'll find the form, and you can send Bob an email and learn more about him. So Bob, thank you so much for your time. We've gone over time, definitely, but it's been really super interesting to hear your story and your journey. Wishing you amazing success with the ongoing journey with your young business. And I know other people would really enjoy, learning about how you got started, and how you are now growing your business from, you're literally a startup helping other startups. So that's pretty amazing as well. So thanks again. And hopefully we'll meet at a networking event again very soon, and wishing you all the best, and speak soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, Bob. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Staying Alive UK. Share your story.